I grew up in cornfields, and the whole notion of forest just was terribly intriguing to me. And the other thing that was intriguing to me was water. We had a muddy river, and lakes rimmed with cottages and speedboats, and to see lakes in the Pigeon River country and the streams. Winter of 1969.
Yeah.
And in the wintertime, snowmobiles were just starting to happen. The only people that came to the Pigeon were guys chasing hounds, hunting. I had the place to myself and seldom saw another evidence of a human. It very quickly became, if you heard a car in the middle of the night, what's that? But fell in love with the land in that wintertime. Ford Kellum provided the philosophical overview.
Yeah.
That the Pigeon was managed by 3 or 4 different offices, and we wanted to have the Pigeon River country to be one state forest. And P.S. Lovejoy's Big Wild would be the cornerstone, bumpy roads and grapples and grammels, and
Right.
that was, Ford knew that, and but Ford provided that whole visionary picture of what the Pigeon River Country State Forest should be. And Jerry, because he worked here and was here, Jerry knew everybody that came to the forest. From people in Gaylord to people in Petoskey to people from Lansing to all the big newspapers had outdoor editors at the time. Grand Rapids Press, the Lansing State Journal, the News, the Detroit News, the Detroit Free Press. And Jerry knew those outdoor writers because they would come here. And there was resistance within the department about what we wanted to do.
Yeah.
And that's why I had to be the public spokesperson, because both of them still worked for the department. Ford later retired early so he could speak freely, although he spoke pretty freely while he was working for the department.
Yeah.
Sam Titus was the person that organized all of that, and we started sending letters out. Sam was our first recruit beyond the 3 of us.
Oh, really?
And she handled the organizing all those names and people, and we started writing them letters. I'd write stuff and have Ford and Jerry look at it. And, yep, you got that right. Every now and then Ford would say, that needs to change. Another guy that was one of the first series of volunteers was Jim Welsh, a staff reporter.
Right.
And Jim wrote about us in the local paper, but Jim also started helping a lot with the writing. Joe Falls was the editor of the Detroit Free Press. Tom Opry was the outdoor writer. And we spent a lot of time with Tom. And he was a gifted writer. Gifted. He wrote some things about bird hunting and trout fishing that are as good as anybody's ever written. And he got on our side earlier, and he got Joe Falls. And there was an editorial writer who was very supportive, Joe Calherda, write an editorial, the Sunday paper. And she would write that, and Tom would run countless articles. And slowly but surely, our list of supporters and number of members of the association grew. And what it enabled me to do was to go to the Natural Resources Commission, or go to the director of the DNR, or a deputy director, and say, I represent the Pigeon River Country Association. And they'd read about us in every newspaper in the state. Governor Milliken got on our side. But we organized in an effective way. Today it would be a historical oddity. No social media, none of that stuff. But newspapers were important then. And the other newspaper that was terribly important, and it was, who was an advisor, was Glenn Shepard at the Northwoods Call. I mean, there was an article every week about the Pigeon River country and what we were trying to do. And he would call and say, Dave, I got another article in the Call coming out tomorrow. This is what I got you quoted as saying. Is that okay? Yep, that's fine, Shep. The big resistance was the hierarchy of the DNR. Who are you, Smethurst, this 25-year-old guy, to tell us what to do in the Pigeon River country?
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to tell you. I'm trying to share a vision about how we can move ahead together. You know, we wouldn't be here today talking if it weren't for Ford Kellum and for Jerry. And the message was, after we won in court using the Michigan Environmental Protection Act, which was brand new, and we had help from Joe Sachs, who wrote it, was the preeminent environmental lawyer in the country at U of M's law school. And of course, Roger Connor was the guy who was the executive director of the West Michigan Environmental Action Council, which was another one of the big state organizations that joined us early on, because it was the right thing to do. And they were very big at the time. Anyway, after winning, Governor Milliken had gotten involved personally. He and Helen came here to go cross-country skiing. The snow melted, and Ned and I took him on a hike. And what he said is, you know, the oil companies and their lobbyists are flooding the legislature with money, and sooner, and their goal is to eliminate the Michigan Environmental Protection Act. Do that, and then the oil companies can do whatever they want. And a bill they've got prepared mandates drilling in the Pigeon River country. And that would be uncontrolled everywhere. And he said, you know, I can slow them down, I can threaten to veto it, I can veto it, but it's going to pass. And some of my other contacts in the legislature had said, it's going to pass. Compromise now while you've got something to bargain from or with. We entered into negotiations, and Ken Sikkema, who was the predecessor of Roger Connor at West Michigan, and I essentially did the negotiations. Ken eventually ended up as the Senate Majority Leader.
Right.
And Tom Washington at MUCC came out in supporting limited controlled oil drilling and proposed the Land Trust Fund. And so we reached a compromise. I wrote the draft form of most of the rules and regulations that eventually became law. Mitch Irwin, who was our state senator from this area at the time, became the advocate in the legislature for the compromise and the leader of it. I would be going down to Lansing weekly and get almost nightly phone calls from Mitch about what happened that day and what we should try to do tomorrow. And eventually we settled it all. And I had friends. Say to me, how much money did Shell Oil pay you? It hurt a lot.
Yeah.
And nothing. And
How did you deal with that?
I probably angrily said, not a goddamn thing. Probably my recollection.
Sounds like you were doing some
And I tried, guys, we're gonna lose everything. Here's our choice.
Right.
This is how I laid it out to them. We either are going to have uncontrolled, hell-bent for leather oil and gas drilling, or we're going to have no gas drilling anywhere and limited, tightly controlled oil drilling in the southern third of the forest.
Right.
Those are the only two choices. There is not a third choice of nothing. That's not an option.
Yeah.
It's one of these two choices.
People were very concerned about the elk. The elk are kind of a sacred animal out here. And the wildlife person that we had in Gaylord said, if you want to keep that elk herd healthy and well and doing good out there, you've got to stop development. You've got to keep it as wild and quiet as you can. And through that, and I guess I'll skip some here, but through that, the Pigeon River Association was formed. They petitioned the department to set this land aside as a special management area. Mm-hmm. And they sent 2 people up into this country. And they met with every kind of people they could think of, all the sportsmen's group, the county people. I think they even met with church groups to see if really, is this what this country wants, is a special quiet area? And the answer come out, yes. Mm-hmm. So they said, okay, that's what we'll do. We'll set that ground aside as a special management area, as a quiet, wild area with its own concept of management.